Okay, so I'm gonna cover a couple of topics in this one. Nuclear engines for well, old nuclear engines. Nuclear engines for rocket vehicle application, or N.E.R.V.A. I'll cover that in a minute, and a couple of other things. But I just wanted to go over the powers thing, because of the last video I made. You know, sometimes it's hard to know what the average millennial or boomer or whatever doesn't quite know about maths. So I just wanted to clarify a couple of things about power. So for example, 1 million is 10 to the power of 6. Maybe I should write that a bit bigger so you can see it better. So 10 to the power of 6 is 1 million. 10 to the power of 9 is 1 billion. 10 to the power of 12 is 1 trillion. Now the calculations that we did yesterday on how, you know, what the chances are of a monkey typing on a typewriter getting the phrase "it was the best of times, it was the worst of times" using only the 26 letters of the alphabet and a space, so no punctuation, no upper and lower case, works out to about 10 to the 71 power. That's a 10 with 71 zeros behind it. Now I was told by a good friend who's also a professor, and who I'm not going to say who he is, I'm not going to say who works or anything like that, but he often shares with some of his friends like myself some of the essays or questions or emails that he gets from some of his students. Now he always anonymizes the students, so there's no way to recognize them, but it is absolutely frightening what these people, you know, they're essentially illiterate. These are people who cannot read or write in a comprehensible manner, and they're college level students. It's absolutely shocking. I mean, there wasn't a kid in my primary school class when I was 7 years old who couldn't outwrite and outread for comprehension any one of these college students. So, you know, if this stuff is difficult for you, you've got my sympathies, but you know, you're also lazy. Go online, learn it. Learn what power to the power of means. It just means 10 to the 6. You know, 10 to the 6 is 1, a 1 with 6 zeros behind it. Now when you multiply powers, so if you were to do 1 billion times 1 trillion, you just add the factorial there. So that would be 9 plus 12 is 21. So that would be 10 to the 21st power. Now one chance in 10 to the 71st is what the chances are of a monkey getting just the 50 characters in the correct order for "it was the best of times, it was the worst of times." And we figured out, if I remember correctly, that if you had 1 billion monkeys on this many planets, yeah, so there's that many planets that we could possibly think exist in the known universe, okay? And we have 1 billion monkeys on every planet. And if I remember right from memory, I might be wrong on this last one, these two are correct, but if I remember right, it's something like 10 to the power of 8 number of seconds in a year. So if you multiply 1 billion monkeys by this many planets, that means there is 1 billion monkeys on every single one of these planets. And they all type 1 letter per second for the duration of a year. The total of all this, you know, you get 10 to the 38th power, okay? Because when you're multiplying things together with powers, you just add it. That's a 10 with 38 zeros behind. Sounds like a big number. Unfortunately, this number here, 10 to the 71, is the chances of you being able to hit that one monkey in all these monkeys typing, getting that sentence right. That's the chances, is 1 over that number. So what does that mean? You know, if this is 1 billion monkeys typing on, you know, trillions and trillions of planets for every second of the year, how many years would you have to type in order to get that? So it's this number divided by that number, and that is a subtraction. Okay, so it's not 71 divided by 38. You get 10 to the 71 divided by 10 to the 38 is equal to 10 to the 33rd power. Okay, now 10 to the 33rd power is still a 1 with 33 zeros behind it. And keep in mind, I'm going to go back up to the top now. I'll just pull a line here. Keep in mind that the age of the universe, as best as we can fathom it, is 1.3 times 10 to the 9th. Okay? That means that the complete date of the age of the universe, yeah, this number is far, far bigger than the age of the universe, and not by 1 or 2 times, not by 33 minus 9 times. It's not bigger than the age of the universe by 24 times. No. It's bigger than the age of the universe. Remember, you've got to subtract. So how many ages of the universe are you going to get into this number? It's going to be 10 to the power of 24. 10 to the power of 24 is, I'll just use a different color. Maybe I'll use green. Hopefully you can see green pretty well. 10 to the power of 24 is the number 1 with 24 zeros behind it, which I don't know whether it'll fit here. We're going to give it a go. There's another 0 there in there. So that's how many times the entire duration of the existence of our universe you would have to do in order to have one monkey type that sentence out. Okay? I hope this explains it a bit better, just using powers. Right, now that that's done with, so anybody that tells you that a million monkeys typing on a million typewriters will eventually write the works of Shakespeare, no, they never will. They never, ever, ever will. This is just one sentence. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So, not gonna happen. Right, now let me tell you about N.E.R.V.A. N.E.R.V.A is an acronym that stands for Nuclear Engine for Rocket Vehicle Application. And essentially what NASA and in the early days was thinking of doing was using nuclear rockets to power rocket ships. This was the first nuclear rocket was tested, the first test engine was tested on the 1st of July of 1959. 59 is 10 years before I was born, so 60 years ago. Now, this very first test engine produced a thrust of 850 pounds per second using 1 pound of fuel. And you think, well, that sounds pretty good, right? Well, it is pretty good, because the space shuttle main engine that we're still using now, although we're using until a short while ago, the thrust for 1 pound of fuel in that engine is 455 pounds of thrust. So the very first test done 60 years ago on a nuclear power engine was almost twice as efficient as the space shuttle main engines are now. But that was nowhere near, by 1969, the tests had progressed further, and they had created little engines to test, and they realized that solid fuel nuclear rocket engines weren't gonna be the best. They would probably top out at about 1,000 pounds of thrust per 1 pound of fuel. But they knew that they could use gas core engines that would get theoretically up to 20,000 pounds of thrust per pound of fuel. The problem they had with that was the extreme heat, which they couldn't control at the time. But by the time 1969 came about, they were basically ready to test the first gas core engines. But the funding for this research went from 1.1 billion in 1959 down to 38 million. So essentially they shut the program down. Nevertheless, the director of the firm that was going to be doing this first test estimated they were absolutely almost certain to get at least 1,800 pounds of thrust per pound of fuel. And the NASA engineers that were trying to build sort of an alternative system, but also gas core engine, they also estimated about 2,000 pounds per thrust of thrust per second for 1 pound of fuel. Now keep in mind, we're talking about 1969 technology. Now it was also then later thought, oh no, we can't use gas-powered rocket engines because they're radioactive, and what if they blow up in the atmosphere, and blah, 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 blah. Now the reality about using gas core nuclear engines, while it would not put the other stars into our reach necessarily, what it would allow probes. This is assuming there is no anti-gravity, right? Which I know for a fact there is, but never mind. We're doing a Simon Dan version of life here. So just using nuclear powered rocket engines, scientists could send a probe to the nearest star and receive the information within their lifetimes. Now the nearest star is about 4 light years away. And in order to give you a sense of what that means, we're going to create a little model of the universe in our heads. And now again, because you're millennials, most of you, I'm going to speak in meters because that's what I'm comfortable with. Just so you understand, because a lot of you are Americans, a meter is a slightly longer unit than a yard. So if you convert what I'm saying to yards, you're not going to be far off. You're going to be about 10% less than what I'm saying. But that's close enough for the purpose of this. So if you reduce the Earth to a pin that is the size, actually I have some pins, give me a second. It's the famous pins that I've used for the moon shadow stuff. So some of you might have seen this before. I have them because I've tracked on a map the places that I've been and that my wife's been and that we've been to together. So anyway, so that is the pin, all right? That is roughly 3 millimeters across, which is perfect for the model I'm going to give you. If you make the Earth this size, and I don't know if you can even see that on the video. If I put my bald head as the background, maybe you can see some light shining off it, I don't know. Anyway, if you make the Earth this size, the sun would roughly be about the size of my lampshade, which is like a beach ball size, 37 centimeters across, just over a foot, okay? A bit over a foot. And it would be a glowing ball of fire 37 meters away. So that's 37 largest steps away from this, and we're orbiting that. Now the moon would be roughly that far out from the Earth, orbiting the Earth. On that scale, Pluto, which is the furthest planet, and I don't give a crap what fat man Tyson, whatever his name is, DeGrasse Tyson. I mean, that's funny because DeGrasse is, again, if you use the Latin name, it means of fat. Of fat Tyson thinks that Pluto is not a planet, but then he's not a scientist, so he pretends to be a scientist, but he's not. Anyway, Pluto, which is the furthest planet of our solar system, on this scale, now Pluto's orbit is a bit eccentric, so it varies quite a bit, but at its furthest reach is going to be basically 1.4 kilometers away from the sun and the Earth, because the distance of 37 meters over 1.4 kilometers is not that big of a difference. Now 1.4 kilometers is just shy of a mile. A mile is roughly 1.6 something kilometers, okay? So it's a couple of hundred meters or yards short of a mile. That's the furthest that our planet our solar system is composed of various planets. Pluto, the furthest one, orbits roughly 1.4 kilometers away from the sun. Remember, beach ball. And Pluto would be the size of the roller ball in the top of a pen. Say that, okay? I don't know if you can even see that because it's probably out of focus, but the little ball, so here would be the Earth, okay? And there's the little ball tip inside that, which is roughly also the same size of our moon, more or less. That's kind of the size of Pluto. And that's orbiting 1.4 kilometers away, almost a mile away from the sun. On that scale, where do you think that the nearest star is? Think about it. Make your educated guess. The nearest star, if we're in London, in a straight line, is in Cape Town. That's another football-sized, a beach ball-sized star. And it's actually more than one because Alpha Centauri is a triple star system. But that's just to give you an idea of our nearest star. Okay, that's the nearest star is 4 light years. Our galaxy, roughly speaking, is about 30,000 light years in depth, because it's a disc-shaped thing. So it's about 30,000 light years thick and about 100 to 120,000 light years across. So you're not going to be traveling the galaxy using rocket ships. It's just not going to happen. Even if you can hit relativistic speeds, there's all sorts of other problems that come up with that. If, however, you can create gravity wells and you can create deep gravity wells, you can eventually create wormholes. Wormholes would allow you to travel to the stars. Now, for those of you that are saying wormholes are crazy, there's no such thing, anti-gravity is nonsense. Okay, let me explain a couple of things to you. First of all, anti-gravity is not nonsense. I have got in this book here the patent numbers of Thomas Townsend Brown's stuff. You can find, I haven't done it in a while, but I had seen video, I think on YouTube, of Townsend Brown's flying discs, hovering and so on. And that stuff all went to the US Naval Research Laboratories in 1954. So if you think that the US Naval Research Laboratories has done absolutely fuck all with Thomas Townsend Brown's stuff since 1954, I think, you're not a skeptic. You're just kind of a moron. But the point is, you will need sort of anti-gravity to travel to the stars. That said, even without anti-gravity using rocket engines, we could still get really good information from our closest star within the lifetime of the scientists that sent it off, which is quite an achievement. So, that's quite an interesting sort of little snippet of information I thought I'd give you. The other couple of points that I just wanted to mention, which are not related, are I have started, so far I've only uploaded one, but I've started to upload my videos on Bitchute, and I'll put the link to the first video. I'll upload them in the same order, 1 to 48 or whatever we're at now. But it takes a bit of time, and I don't have a lot of time, so it's sort of a side project because I've seen evidence that I'm already sort of shadow banned. I've seen evidence of little tricks that the YouTuber, whoever controls YouTube is doing on my channel already, and it's not unexpected. People like Vox, and whatever, they eventually get strikes against them, they get banned, whatever. Being TheKurgan, I don't have to wait until I'm at 30,000 followers or 200,000 followers. I generally speak the truth in such a direct manner that I piss off the powers that be far faster than most of the people that I've ever come across. It's a wonder I haven't been droned yet. But I expect I will eventually be kicked off YouTube at some point, and that's fine. It is all going to eventually be on Bitchute and on other platforms which I've got ready and so on. So when that happens, we're ready for it. It's not going to be a big deal. And again, so different topic again, change. If you really, I'm going to put the link in the notes of the video. So if you're on a mobile, probably you can't see the notes. I don't really know how that works, but if you go on the desktop and you read the notes under this video, I'll put a link there of a debate that was done between William Lane Craig and Christopher Hitchens. Now, Christopher Hitchens is now dead. William Lane Craig, as far as I know, is still alive and well. And it's a really interesting debate because, this is the atheist kill shot. And look, if I wanted to spend time on this sort of thing, I can come up with a dozen similar types of proofs that just simply invalidate the totality of the concept of, our reality just being happening by random chance. But William Lane Craig argues with Christopher Hitchens about the existence of God and whether it's a reasonable position compared to the non-existence of God. Now, I have seen this before, but I just recently watched it again because it's funny and it's interesting and it's amazing, William Lane Craig is a very good debater, and he lays out his argument with such precision and economy of style and logic, clearly states his argument. And Christopher Hitchens can do nothing other than faff and banter and try and sort of work his way around this, in a way that doesn't address the issues at all. It's all personal, subjective little anecdotes type of stuff compared to a rigorous philosophical, logical syllogisms one after the other. And I believe that Vox Day described this debate, I think it was him. I'm not sure if it was with William Lane Craig against Christopher Hitchens or William Lane Craig against Sam Harris. But one of those two, I think Vox described it as a frog meets a bullet train. It's like, and it's a very apt description. Oh, and by the way, for those of you that know the inside joke, the train was fine. So yeah, it's really astonishing. But the thing is, if you are an atheist or agnostic or whatever, I get where you're coming from. I was agnostic for most of my life, and I was atheist at least until the age of 16 or so. And by the age of 19, I'd essentially become an agnostic. But I sort of get your point. I get where you're coming from. But keep in mind that atheists are just wounded children. Atheists are little kids that can only think in binary mode, that are basically angry with some injustice in the world, which is, well, if God is good, why do we have suffering? Why do I suffer? Why do babies die? That sort of thing. And it is a valid, if you're a child, if you've got a child's mind. I mean, my rejection of Christianity was based precisely on that. I was 7 years old, and the description of the priest gave me of what Jesus died for our sins was a blasphemy. The way he explained it, it was just bad, which is wrong. And I railed against that injustice. I was like, what? You're telling me that it's okay for a completely innocent person to get nailed to a cross so that we can to pay for our sins? What kind of sick nonsense is that? There was no explanation of everything behind that. So how else would I to interpret it? And a lot of you are uneducated. You're ignorant, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a factual statement of fact. A lot of you are absolutely ignorant of Christianity, as I was for a long time, because you think based on what you've been told, based on what you've heard, based on the cultural zeitgeist, which is essentially created by the synagogue of Satan in Hollywood. That's what they are. That's what Jesus called them, synagogue of Satan. They run Hollywood, they run most of the media. They essentially create the zeitgeist of the planet. The zeitgeist is the cultural norm, let's say. So you think it's culturally normal to have abortions, gay marriage, blah, blah, blah. And it's not. It's all an abomination. But, it's very much like The Matrix. That's why The Matrix was such a hit, because unconsciously almost all of us realized that there's some truth to that film, in the sense that we are all essentially trapped in this matrix where we're made to believe X, Y, and Z, and the reality is completely different. So there was an absolute parallel in reality with that. And also another very interesting point that I heard the Wachowski brothers, when they were still brothers instead of transgender sisters or whatever they are now, I think it was an interview that asked, like, well, how did you come up with that? And they said, well, we figured that martial arts was the closest thing to a link between spirituality and the material world. And I would agree with that. In Gorin no Sho, a book of 5 rings that Miyamoto Musashi, the most famous samurai of Japan, wrote, and he wrote it at the end of his life when he was in his 60s, he put in there that strategy was one of the holy skills, and I believe that to be true. I believe that is true, because it is, if used correctly, if used for good, strategy is absolutely required. Keeping in mind that we are behind enemy lines, as soldiers for our Lord. So, okay, so that's basically the 3 things I just wanted to go. Try to keep it sort of quick and hopefully interesting. If you do have questions, it's okay to ask questions, but first listen, right? Don't just ask dumbass questions because you can't be bothered to hear what I've discussed. If you haven't looked at all the videos, that's fine. I don't expect everybody to do that, but if I just tell you look at video whatever, or I've answered that before, then figure it out. If you do have a genuine question, there was a very interesting on the last video. There was I can't remember the guy's name, something OBS, I can't remember, but anyway, some atheist that said, oh, you're basically arguing for intelligent design, and then he made a list of his objections. And it's just pathetic. His objections are just so ridiculously stupid and incoherent that I did respond. And I responded in my usual way, which is, I made fun of his stupidity while crushing his complete nonsense. And I'm not going to waste a lot of time on somebody like that, but it is instructive. And I did use mostly rhetoric in replying, because people like that need to learn that they are not equipped to have an opinion, and they shouldn't air that opinion. If you want to air such stupid opinions, go do it somewhere else. Don't do it near me. I will not tolerate that level of ignorance and arrogance put together. These are people that literally cannot do basic math and cannot follow what I've just written down here. And he argued against the fact that he was a millennial because I called him a millennial. He said, oh, you got my age wrong. Well, that's even worse. That's not better. If you're a millennial, at least you have the potential excuse that you didn't have any proper education, that you believed what the boomers told you, so you kind of started, you were an idiot from the start, because I'm Generation X and we were raised by the boomers and we ignored everything that fucking said because we knew it was bullshit. But the millennials swallowed it whole, and they didn't have the benefit of classical education, of basic maths, so if you're a millennial and you don't know that the moon is not made of cheese, you sort of might have some potential excuse, apart from the fact that you're a lazy bastard, okay? If you don't know the basics of life, and yet you can use a phone enough to find my videos, you are a lazy couch potato, fucking probably obese fuckhead. Because there's no reason for you to be that ignorant. You can educate yourself. There is enough information out there. A lot of it is trash, a lot of it is shit, but there's enough information out there that you can learn the basics of mathematical concepts. The basics, just the basics of maths. You need it. It's important. The basics of a classical education. Know who the Spartans were. Know what happened in Egypt, more or less, according to what the Egyptologist tells you, which is probably all a pile of shit. But read the histories of Herodotus. Read the Iliad. Have some understanding of the basic classical information. Know where you come from, that sort of thing. But if you're a boomer and you still don't fucking know the stuff, you've got no excuse. None. Absolutely none. All right? And keep in mind, if you're one of these people that thinks that progress only goes forward, no. In the 1800s, the average person who spoke English, who read and wrote in English, had a vocabulary that was roughly 3 times the vocabulary that the average English-speaking person has today. Okay? And if you try and take a test for the high school admission of the people that were going to school in the 1800s, and you compare it to what they're doing at university now in their first year, the high school guy from the 1800s would kick the crap out of present day schooler, college age, university age students. One guy left a very nice comment, I have to say, but saying, it's humbling reading your Face on Mars book and to realize that you were 26 years old when you wrote that, and the level of knowledge you have is just, it's humbling. It's humbling because you're not curious enough. I didn't have particularly great teachers. I did have a relatively great, decent teachers compared to what I saw later in life, what I saw later when I came to England, and I saw what the average teacher was like in the UK, and in the late 80s. And it was shocking to me. It was absolutely shocking. I was lucky enough to have gone to school in a third world country where, you went to still a private school if you had the money, and my parents luckily had enough money to send me to a half decent school. So I actually had teachers that could still teach something. We had our bunch of cretins there too, don't get me wrong, but at least we had some modicum of intelligent teachers. But it wasn't due to them that I know what I know. For the most part, it was due to me spending a lot of time in the library looking stuff up. I mean, by the time I was 16, I knew how laser worked because I read it up in the library. I just checked books out or stay there during my periods that I didn't have work to do. And I learned it. So why can't you do the same? And we didn't have the internet. I had to physically go to the library, look for that book, pull it out, read it in the library if I couldn't check it out, or check it out and read it within a couple of weeks and bring it back. You got the fucking internet. You can literally figure out what solitonic waves are with a tap of a button. Do you think that I could fucking figure out what solitonic waves were? I didn't have the internet. I had to go and look that shit up in some obscure books of mathematics, the theoretical physics. I read Kip Thorne, Black Holes and Time Warps for fun. And I loved that book, Black Holes and Time Warps by Kip Thorne. Brilliant book, except for the last bit where he says that wormholes can be used to time travel, and he's fucking wrong. Because his maths tells him that, but his maths has got symbols like infinity in it that he doesn't know how to interpret in the real world. And I believe I can do that a better job than that. So, that said, one of my favorite shows on the abhorrent scum stuff that is Netflix is Timeless, I think it's called. I don't know why, I just really love that show. I love the costumes, I love the fact that they throw the guys back into these historical situations, and then it's pretty Hollywood and whatever, but I quite like it. It's sort of, you don't have to think too hard, and it's just funny. Okay, so that was a bit of a mixed bag, but hopefully a lot of things to keep your fruit fly attention span, you damn millennials. And again, eventually you'll get my sense of humor. All of those of you that get offended by the stuff I'm saying, just go away, go somewhere else, right? This channel's not for you. If you get upset by the stuff I'm telling you about you being an incompetent, illiterate, innumerate millennial, go away, go to some nice fluffy channel. Oh, one more thing. I'm gonna put the link for this too in the notes, hopefully I remember. There's a lady called, her channel I think is called Amazing Polly. I think it's called Amazing Polly. And the latest video, I'm going to put the link to her latest video, which is about Epstein and the eugenicists. Brilliant video, brilliant piece of video. Awesome. It's only 28 minutes long. I strongly suggest that you look at least at that video. I've only seen that one video. I don't know what the rest of her channel is like, but it was thanks to one of the commenters that said, oh, you, Vox, Owen, and then they mentioned Frankly Speaking, I think, and Amazing Polly. Now, Frankly Speaking, I had a quick look at his channel. It's not for me. But Amazing Polly, I've only seen the one video, but it was awesome. So hopefully her other videos are just as good. So, check it out. I'll put the link in. And yeah. Have a good weekend.